Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be looking at the disappearance of Asha Degree.
Oh, yeah. This case is really fascinating, and it's been unsolved for over 2 decades.
It has a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah.
We're going to be using excerpts from the Wikipedia article about Asha's disappearance for this deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
Ready to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. So it all started on Valentine's Day 2000.
Yay!
9-year-old Asha Degree vanished from her home in Shelby, North Carolina. Early morning hours.
Yeah. And you know what's crazy about this case is that her family was super close. I mean, incredibly close-knit.
They were.
They were active in their church, really focused on education, and they were very protective of Asha.
I was reading that they didn't even have a computer at home
Yeah, I read that too.
because they were worried about the internet and stuff,
Yeah.
which is kind of ironic because her case ended up getting a lot of attention online.
Right. You would think that it really does make you think about the world back then and how different things were. But all that protectiveness, it really just makes her disappearance even more strange.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because if they were so careful, what could have made her leave her home in the middle of the night?
Right. That's the big question. And it's where the details of that night, they become so important. So there was this power outage in the neighborhood.
Oh, right. I remember reading about that.
Yeah. It was caused by a car accident. And it was a Sunday night, and the power came back on around 12:30 a.m.
Okay.
So Asha's dad, Harold, he checked on her and her brother O'Brien several times throughout the night, and he saw them both sleeping.
So everything seemed normal.
Yeah, seemed like a normal night. But then things take a very strange turn. Sometime between 3:45 and 4:14 a.m., Asha gets out of bed.
Wow.
And here's the thing. It's a stormy night. Raining pretty hard. Asha packs a book bag with some clothes and other stuff, and then she leaves the house.
It's almost as if she was getting ready for something, packing a bag like that.
I know, right? It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It just doesn't make sense with that initial theory that she ran away.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's hard to believe that a 9-year-old would, especially someone described as shy and cautious,
Right.
would run away in the middle of the night during a rainstorm.
Exactly. It doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay, so she leaves the house,
Yeah.
and that's where those two people who saw her come into play, right?
Yeah.
The eyewitness accounts.
Exactly. So there were these two motorists driving along Highway 18, and they both reported seeing Asha walking along the side of the road around 4 a.m. One of them actually, he turned around. He thought it was weird to see a young girl out alone at that hour.
Yeah.
But when he tried to approach her, Asha ran into the woods and, disappeared.
Oh, wow. It must have been so scary for him to see her like that and then just gone.
It's a really eerie detail, and it becomes the last confirmed sighting of her.
It's like she vanished.
It is. And it's one of the things that makes this case so strange,
Absolutely. So what happened next?
Well, as you can imagine, as soon as her parents realized she was missing, they immediately called the police. And the response from both the community and law enforcement, it was huge.
I bet. Everyone in the area must have been out looking for her.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There were tons of searches involving hundreds of volunteers and officers. They used everything. Helicopters, search dogs.
Wow.
They looked everywhere. And the media coverage, it was intense.
Yeah, I remember. It was all over the news.
Asha's story was being broadcast all over the country.
With that many people looking, you'd think they would found something.
You would think so, right. But here's the thing. There wasn't a strong scent trail for the dogs to follow. It's like she just disappeared.
Wait, really? No scent trail? Can you explain that a bit more? Why is that such a big deal?
Oh, sure. So when someone walks or runs, they leave behind microscopic skin cells and other traces of their scent.
Okay.
Trained search dogs can pick up on these scents and follow them, even over long distances.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. But in Asha's case, the lack of a strong scent trail, it suggested that she might have been moved from the area where she was last seen, maybe in a vehicle.
Oh, I see.
That detail really made the investigation more complicated, and it kind of fueled that theory that she might have been abducted.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like a crucial piece of the puzzle that's just missing.
Exactly. And it's even more strange because all they found were just a few of her belongings. A mitten, some candy wrappers, a pencil.
Really? That's all?
Yeah. A marker, and a hair bow.
And these are all found, near where she was last seen.
Yeah?
But they didn't give any real clues about where she went.
No, not really. And, after a week of searching, they called it off.
Wow. despite all those people, all those resources.
Yeah, 9,000 man-hours,
Hmm.
hundreds of leads. They just couldn't find any trace of her.
So what do they do next? I mean, that's got to be incredibly frustrating.
I know. Where do you even start when a 9-year-old just vanishes like that?
Exactly.
Well, they started to look at other possibilities, like maybe she didn't run away after all.
Yeah, we touched on that.
But there were some issues with that theory.
Right.
So we can talk more about that in part 2 of this deep dive. It seems like that runaway theory, it was really just the start of a much bigger mystery.
Yeah, it does. And we'll definitely unpack all of that next time.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Asha Degree case.
Yeah, we've laid out the timeline, those initial searches and everything. The fact that there was no scent trail for the dogs,
Right.
it just feels like we're no closer to understanding what happened to Asha.
Yeah, it's true. And the lack of a clear answer, it's both fascinating and really frustrating at the same time.
Absolutely.
So, should we maybe shift gears a little bit and look at some of the theories that investigators were considering?
Yeah, let's do that. So we know the runaway theory was kind of quickly dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk me through why investigators were so skeptical of that?
Sure. So, most kids who run away are teenagers, not 9-year-olds. And even then, there's usually a clear reason, like a fight with their family or problems at school, something that pushes them to leave.
Makes sense.
But with Asha, there was nothing like that.
Yeah, she was described as a happy kid, well-adjusted.
Exactly. And she was close to her family. There's just no reason to think that she would run away, especially not in the middle of the night during a storm.
Right. And what about the book bag she packed? Does that support the runaway idea or go against it?
That's a tough one. On the one hand, packing a bag suggests she planned it out a little, which, kind of fits with running away.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, what 9-year-old knows where to go or what to do when they run away?
That's true.
It just seems really unlikely that she would have been able to survive on her own for very long.
So if she didn't run away, what else could have happened?
Well, the theory that started to make more sense was abduction.
Right. Which makes sense with those people who saw her. Remember, she was seen walking along Highway 18 really early in the morning. Maybe she was being forced to walk by whoever took her.
That's definitely possible. And the fact that one of those drivers saw her run into the woods when he tried to get closer to her, that could mean she was afraid of being caught with her abductor.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's terrifying.
It is, but the question is, if she was abducted, why? What would be the reason?
Yeah. Why her? That's a good question.
And unfortunately, that's still a mystery. There have been a lot of possible suspects over the years, but nothing solid has come up.
Were there any leads or theories that seemed really promising, even if they didn't go anywhere in the end?
There was a tip in 2004 from an inmate who said he knew where Asha was buried. That got a lot of attention and gave people hope, but the search just turned up animal bones.
Ugh, it's so sad when that happens.
Yes.
Gives the family false hope and it wastes everyone's time.
It's a huge setback, and it really shows how hard it is to figure out which leads are real and which ones are just from people wanting attention, Investigators have to be really careful about where the information is coming from and weigh the risks and benefits of following up on each lead.
For sure. So abduction was the main theory for a while, but were there any other possibilities they considered?
There were a few, though none as strong as the abduction theory. Some people thought maybe Asha was hit by a car, a hit and run, and that her body was hidden to cover up the crime.
But wouldn't there be some signs of an accident? Like damage to the car or something?
You'd think so, but hit and runs can sometimes leave very little evidence, especially if the driver is being careful.
Oh, okay.
And since Asha was seen walking along the highway before she disappeared, that makes this theory less likely.
Yeah, that's true. She wasn't lying hurt on the road. What about the possibility that she just wandered off and got lost in the woods? It was dark and stormy that night. Seems like a 9-year-old could get disoriented pretty easily.
It's possible. But again, knowing Asha's personality, it doesn't seem likely. Remember, she was shy and cautious. It's hard to imagine her going off into the woods alone, especially in those conditions.
Yeah.
Plus, they searched the area really well and didn't find anything.
So it seems like abduction is the most likely scenario?
Yeah.
But there's still so much we don't know.
Yeah.
What about the stuff in her book bag? The Dr. Seuss book, McKelliget's Pool, and that New Kids on the Block t-shirt? Could those be clues?
They could be, but we still don't know what they mean. Investigators couldn't figure out where those items came from or how Asha got them.
Did they try to trace them back to anyone? Like maybe someone in the community recognized them?
They did. In 2018, they asked the public for information about the book and the t-shirt, hoping someone would remember seeing them or knowing how Asha got them. but nobody came forward with any real answers.
Wow. It makes you wonder if those things were put in the bag on purpose after she disappeared.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
to mislead investigators or throw them off?
It's definitely a possibility, and it makes the case even more complex. It suggests that someone planned this out, which is pretty scary.
So we have this puzzle with missing pieces. The reason for the abduction, who the abductor is, what those things in the book bag mean. It's so frustrating to have all these questions and no answers.
It really is. And for years, it felt like the investigation wasn't going anywhere. Despite the FBI being involved and all the leads they followed, nothing concrete came up.
But then in 2015, they announced they were reopening the investigation. What made them decide to do that?
Well, sometimes with cold cases, new technology or new ways of investigating can give them a reason to look at the evidence again. And in Asha's case, they were also hoping that after all these years, someone might be more willing to talk.
Did they offer a reward for information?
Yep, they did. It's pretty common in cold cases, and it can work sometimes to get people to come forward.
Did it work in this case?
Hard to say for sure, but they did get a new lead in 2016 that seemed important. Someone said they saw Asha getting into a dark green car the night she disappeared, either a Lincoln or a Ford Thunderbird.
That's pretty specific. Did they ever figure out anything from that?
Sadly, no. Like a lot of leads in this case, it just went cold.
So even with the investigation reopened and a reward offered, it seems like they were still hitting dead ends. What happened next?
Well, in 2017, the FBI brought in their Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, or CARD team, to help with the investigation.
The card team. What is that?
Oh, there are agents who are specially trained to handle child abduction cases. They have a lot of experience and specific knowledge about these kinds of investigations.
So like the best of the best when it comes to missing kids.
Yeah, you could say that they worked with the state and local police, did hundreds of interviews, and looked over every single piece of evidence in Asha's case.
Wow, it's amazing they're so dedicated even after so many years.
It really is. It shows how committed they are to finding answers for Asha and her family.
But even with the card team, there wasn't much news for a few years. Until 2020 when there was another tip from an inmate. Right.
Yeah, his name was Marcus Mellon, and he claimed to have information about Asha's disappearance. It seemed like there might finally be a break in the case, but unfortunately, that tip didn't lead anywhere either.
So at this point, it's been 20 years, and every promising lead has gone nowhere. Were investigators starting to give up hope?
It's tough to say for sure, but they definitely weren't giving up. And then in 2024, the case took a really big turn.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting. What happened in 2024?
Well, based on some new physical evidence, the FBI and the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office got a search warrant.
And what did they find?
They took a bunch of things that could be important, including a 1964 AMC Rambler. But more importantly, the search warrant showed that the investigation was changing direction.
Changing direction.
The warrant said that they now think Asha was murdered and that her body was hidden.
Wow, so they don't think she ran away anymore.
It seems that way. And what's even more shocking is that they named two people from the area, a husband and wife, as suspects in the case.
So after all this time, there might finally be a break in the case.
It's definitely possible. But we have to remember that this is still an ongoing investigation.
It's unbelievable that after decades of mystery and dead ends, there are now suspects in Asha's case. It feels like we're finally getting somewhere.
It does, but it also brings up a bunch of new questions.
Yeah, like what led them to these suspects?
Exactly. What's the connection to that old car? And will this finally lead to justice for Asha?
I guess we'll have to wait and see. But one thing's for sure. This new development gives us hope in a case that's been full of mystery and sadness for so long.
You're absolutely right. And we'll talk about those questions and more in the final part of our deep dive.
We're back, and I gotta say, I'm still processing all that new stuff from 2024 in Asha's case. It's wild to think that after all this time, there are actually suspects.
Yeah, it's a major development in a case that's been cold for so long, but it also opens up like a whole new set of questions and challenges, you know?
It does, and I think it's important to think about how this must be for Asha's family. I mean, after 25 years of not knowing to have some hope, I can't even imagine.
It's got to be a lot for them. But it really shows their strength that they never gave up hope. They've kept Asha's memory alive, organized events, and pushed for the investigation to continue. It's really inspiring.
It really is, and it makes you realize how important that is, not just for Asha's family, but for any family going through something like this, to never give up hope, even when it feels impossible.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's that belief, that refusal to let go that leads to a breakthrough. And in Asha's case, it seems like the authorities were just as determined to find answers. They reopened the investigation and brought in the card team.
Right. Speaking of the guard team, I'd love to know more about what they did in the 2024 stuff.
Hmm.
Did they help find these suspects?
We don't know everything about the investigation yet, but it's highly likely that the card team's expertise was a big part of this. Remember, they're the specialists in child abduction cases. They bring a whole different level of skill and experience to these tough investigations.
Makes you wonder if there was one specific thing that was missed before that finally led them to these suspects.
Hmm.
Maybe a new forensic technique or someone finally decided to talk.
Yeah, could
Huh?
be. And that's often how cold cases get solved. A new piece of evidence pops up or a witness finally speaks up. Sometimes it just takes time and a fresh look at things.
In that car, that 1964 Rambler, finding that during the search just adds another layer to everything. What do you think about that?
It's definitely intriguing. Was the car involved in Asha's disappearance somehow? Could it have evidence linking those suspects to the crime? It's all speculation at this point, but
Yeah.
it's a pretty interesting clue that makes it seem like investigators are on the right track.
It's like those old detective movies
Right.
where they're dusting for fingerprints and suddenly find a crucial piece of evidence that was right there all along.
Exactly. And even though we don't have every detail yet, it's pretty clear that finding that car was a big deal in this case.
It is interesting, though, that they haven't said who the suspects are or any specifics about what led them to these people.
Mm.
Why do you think that is?
Well, they're probably trying to protect the investigation. If they say too much, it could hurt their case, especially if they're still gathering evidence.
Right. They don't want to give the suspects a heads up so they can get rid of evidence or come up with an alibi.
Exactly. And this case has been in the news a lot from the very beginning. There's so much attention on it. The authorities are probably being extra careful to make sure they have a strong case before they say anything publicly.
Yeah, makes sense. They don't want to make a mistake and let these suspects go free.
Right. It's a delicate balance between keeping the public informed and making sure the investigation stays on track.
Well, it sounds like we just have to wait and see what happens.
Mm.
But it's hard not to feel hopeful that maybe we're closer to figuring out what happened to Asha.
I agree. And it's important to remember that even though this case isn't over yet, having named suspects is a huge step towards justice.
It is, and no matter what happens, this deep dive has been really eye-opening. Asha's story shows just how complicated these cases can be and how dedicated the people who work on them are.
It also shows the power of hope and how important it is to never stop looking for answers.
Well said. As we wrap up our deep dive into Asha Degree's disappearance, I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. It's been incredible.
It was my pleasure. It's cases like this that remind us why it's so important to keep talking about them, to raise awareness, and to fight for those who are missing.
And to everyone listening, if you have any information about Asha Degree, please contact the FBI or the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. Even something small could be really important.
Asha's story shows that every little bit of information matters and that hope never really goes away.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the world. Tell us what you think about this episode. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.